Nobody remembered how it started anymore. Maybe it was a mining dispute, a careless insult during a peace summit, or just one unlucky shot fired from the wrong ship at the wrong time. The galaxy had been a simmering pot of tensions for years. Humanity had been the newcomers, fresh, curious, a little arrogant, but mostly harmless. At least, that's what the other species thought. They didn't know us. Not really. At first, it was supposed to be a small conflict, a quick war, maybe a few burned colonies, a treaty signed under duress, the usual politics of power. The bigger empires, the Kravlon Syndicate, the Trelzon Unity, the Vor Consortium, they laughed when humanity sent its first fleets into battle. Primitive, they said, emotional, reckless, easy prey. The first battles were brutal, but predictable. Human ships were torn apart by advanced alien weaponry. Thousands died screaming in the cold of space. Entire settlements were wiped out. Their cities melted into glass by plasma bombs. Their leaders paraded on enemy broadcasts as warnings. But humans, they didn't break. They adapted. Fast. Within months, new ships rolled off the dry docks. They were tougher, uglier, built with the single-minded purpose of surviving hell. New weapons, reverse-engineered from captured tech, tore into enemy fleets like rabid wolves. And something darker happened too. Something the galaxy wasn't ready for. The rules of war, the old codes of honor that every other species obeyed, humanity shattered them like brittle glass. No mercy, no surrender. Every battle ended with the same brutal message. If you cross us, we will erase you. Human soldiers became nightmares whispered in alien tongues. They called them Deathborn, Flesh Reapers, World Breakers. Small squads of humans dropped onto enemy worlds, leaving behind nothing but ash and broken monuments. They learned alien psychology, used it against them, turned fear into a weapon deadlier than any plasma rifle. There was no peace offering, no ceasefire negotiations. Humanity didn't want forgiveness. They wanted fear, and they got it. Children across the galaxy cried at night, not from tales of monsters hiding under the bed, but of humans slipping through the cracks in the walls. But it wasn't enough. No, not yet. Humanity had lost too much to stop now. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something worse. Revenge. In the burned-out ruins of New Saigon, under a sky still bleeding from orbital bombardments, General Merik stood before the shattered remains of her homeworld. Her skin was cut from shrapnel. Her armor was dented and bloody. Her voice, when she spoke to the scattered remnants of Earth's military, was low and full of something far colder than rage. They thought we were soft, she said. They thought we would kneel. They were wrong. The crowd, a battered legion of survivors, listened in silence. The wind carried the stench of death across the cratered ground. "We will not rebuild," Elena said, eyes burning like twin stars. "We will not forgive. From this day forward, we are not the dreamers. We are not the lost children of a dying world. We are the nightmare. We are the extinction they begged for." And the galaxy would never forget what came next. The campaign that followed was called many things by historians: the Great Purge, the Age of Fire, humanity's reckoning. But to those who lived it, it was simply terror in its purest form. Fleet by fleet, world by world, humanity moved through the stars like a storm that would never end. Their ships were no longer sleek or beautiful. They were brutal machines, built with sharp, jagged lines to inspire dread. Some even broadcasted the screams of fallen enemies across enemy frequencies before each battle, a psychological warfare tactic that made even the bravest alien admirals hesitate before giving orders to engage. The Vor Consortium was the first major empire to fall. They had once called humanity a minor pest. That memory didn't save them. On the red sands of Vor Prime, survivors crawled from the ruins of their shining cities only to be rounded up by human shock troops. No treaties were signed. No mercy was shown. The humans dismantled the Vor civilization piece by piece, stripping their libraries, burning their temples, and smashing their monuments into dust. They weren't just killing bodies anymore. They were erasing histories, cultures, memories. Across the galaxy, desperate cries for help echoed from every system under siege. The Kravlon Syndicate pleaded for an emergency alliance. The Trelzan Unity sent emissaries offering reparations and apologies. Old enemies who had fought for centuries now begged each other to stand together against the humans. But it was too late. Humanity didn't want peace. They didn't even want control. They wanted the galaxy to fear the night, to jump at shadows, to wake up sweating from nightmares where Earth's flag burned above their ruins. General Merik watched all of it unfold from the bridge of the dreadnought Remembrance, her personal command ship. She wore no insignia anymore. Humanity had no need for symbols of rank. All that mattered was survival, vengeance, and dominance. A junior officer approached her, his face pale even under the harsh light of the war room. "General," he said, voice trembling slightly, "we've received word from the Council of Eldari. They offer unconditional surrender and reparations. They're willing to give us 12 core worlds and access to their entire tech vault." Elena stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Her eyes were like the cold vacuum between stars. Empty, merciless. "Burn them anyway," she said. The officer hesitated. "But ma'am, they surrendered." "They should have thought of that before they butchered our children," Elena said, her voice flat. "No deals. No forgiveness." The command was given. Within hours, the Eldari core worlds were turned into blackened husks, their once beautiful biospheres choked with ash and radiation. News of the massacre traveled faster than light, and with it, the legend of humanity's wrath grew. Entire star systems went dark, their populations hiding underground, trying to become invisible. Pirates, mercenaries, smugglers, all vanished like mist before the advancing human fleets. Even the most savage species in the galaxy, the warlike Vardoth, who prided themselves on their bloodthirstiness, refused to engage human ships. It didn't matter. Humanity hunted them down anyway. It wasn't war anymore, it was extermination. And the galaxy finally understood. This wasn't about victory. It wasn't even about survival. It was about fear, pure, crushing fear. And humanity was winning. The third year of the war turned the galaxy into a graveyard. Where once stars had twinkled against the velvet darkness, now there were only fields of wreckage. Silent hulks of destroyed ships, charred remains of orbital cities, shattered satellites tumbling endlessly through the void. Humanity had become something more than just a military force. They were myth now. Every child born on an alien world grew up fearing the faceless, relentless monsters that came from the cradle of Earth. But it wasn't just soldiers anymore. It was every human. Farmers, doctors, teachers, scientists. Everyone had become part of the machine of war. Everyone had blood on their hands. No one was innocent. On the war front, Captain Marcus Vance led the 17th Infiltration Corps, one of the most feared units in existence. His orders were simple. Make examples. Not just tactical victories, but psychological devastation. On a small jungle moon called Veyron 6, a Trelzan refugee colony had hidden away, deep within the thick, misty forests. They thought the trees and fog would protect them. They thought humanity would ignore them, an unarmed, starving cluster of civilians. They were wrong. Vance's team dropped from orbit in silence, their black-armored forms blending into the shadows. The refugees didn't even know they were under attack until the first firestorm swallowed their shelters. Vance watched through his visor as mothers clutched their children and fled into the trees, only to be corralled by walls of flame and gunfire. His men didn't fire indiscriminately. No, they herded the survivors, forced them into clearings, made sure there were witnesses to the horror. Trelzan culture valued honor above all else. They believed dying in battle was the only noble death. Vance knew this, and so his orders were clear. Don't give them battle. Give them slaughter. Give them shame. When the smoke cleared, the survivors stumbled away from the ruins, broken in both body and spirit. Messages were carved into the smoldering trees in every human language, translated through alien symbols. We are your fate. Word spread quickly. The Trelzan unity crumbled from within a month later, as suicides, mutinies, and desertions tore through their ranks faster than any human fleet could have. Back aboard the Remembrance, General Merik stood in the war room, watching the holographic star maps flicker. Red marked every fallen world. Yellow marked the systems still resisting. Green. There was no green left. There hadn't been for months. An advisor approached her, hesitant. A rare thing these days. Few dared interrupt Merik when she was planning a campaign. General, the advisor said, intelligence reports that several non-aligned systems are considering preemptive surrender. They're requesting guarantees of survival if they turn over their resources and leaders. Merik turned, a slow, deliberate motion that made the younger officer step back instinctively. Guarantees? She echoed, voice dripping with scorn. Where were their guarantees when Earth's colonies burned, when our children screamed into the void? She leaned closer, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Tell them no deals, no treaties. They can run, they can hide, it doesn't matter. Humanity remembers. The advisor nodded quickly and fled, leaving Merik alone with her maps and her ghosts. Outside, in the cold blackness of space, humanity's fleets grew ever larger, fueled by salvaged alien technology and the iron will of a species betrayed. They didn't build monuments to their fallen. They didn't sing songs of heroism or victory. They built war machines. They forged nightmares. In the Outer Rim systems, an old alien sage, blind and half-mad from decades of war, spoke to a gathering of refugees. His voice was cracked and brittle, but heavy with prophecy. You do not understand the humans, he rasped. You think they fight for pride or conquest or even revenge. Number no, you fools. They fight because it is all they have left. Pain has consumed them, shaped them. They have become the storm itself. You cannot reason with a storm. You can only pray it does not see you. But the storm was already on its way. Engines screamed across the void. Hulls bristled with weapons crafted in the fires of endless war. The humans were coming, and they would not stop. In the quiet stretches of Sector 9, where the stars hung like cold lanterns in an endless night, the last great alliance of alien species prepared for their final stand. They had no illusions anymore. This wasn't a battle they could win. It was a delaying tactic, a desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, a miracle would save them. The Council of 9 Worlds, once proud rulers of half the known galaxy, met aboard the Sanctum Eternum, a ship the size of a small moon. It bristled with shields and cannons, wrapped in layers of armor thicker than cities, powered by the last relics of ancient technology no one fully understood. In a vast, shadowed chamber, the council argued in a dozen languages. They are but one species, shouted Vokhtar of the Rilnak's dominion, his spines trembling with fury. We outnumber them. We outgun them. And yet your worlds are ash, Rilnaks, hissed Madame Seleth of the Kryn Confederacy. Their rage is a fire we cannot extinguish. We feed it with every battle. They have no honor, croaked High Minister Julaven, her eyes hollow. They fight like beasts, worse than beasts. They destroy not to conquer but to erase. We are facing something unnatural, At the head of the table, Supreme Chancellor Virel of the Eldari Alliance lifted his hand for silence. His golden robes, once a symbol of wisdom and peace, hung heavy on his frail frame. "We have but one option left," Virel said, voice tired but steady. "We fight to the last. We show them that we will not die quietly." Across the chamber, there was a grim nodding of heads. No words of hope were offered. No speeches of triumph. Just acceptance. They sent their fleets to the edge of the Helios Rift, a strategic choke point where they could force humanity to come to them. It was the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. Millions of vessels, countless soldiers, the combined might of a dozen civilizations. And it wasn't enough. From the blackness beyond the rift, the human armada emerged like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Their ships, black as oil and bristling with weapons, advanced without formation, without ceremony. No battle cries, no demands, no warnings, only the slow, inevitable march of death. On the bridge of the Remembrance, General Merik stood motionless, hands clasped behind her back. Beside her, Captain Vance watched the enemy fleets align in tight, disciplined formations. "They're ready for us," he said quietly. "They think that matters," Merik replied, her voice colder than the vacuum outside. She gestured toward the comms officer. "Broadcast." The officer nodded and opened a channel. Across every ship, every station, every world tuned to the frequencies of the Helios Rift. A single message echoed. Not words, not a speech, just one image. Earth burning. The humans didn't need to explain. The galaxy already knew why they fought. With a silent command, the human fleets opened fire. No tactics, no mercy, just overwhelming, relentless destruction. The Helios Rift lit up like a dying sun. Energy beams tore through capital ships like paper. Missile swarms blackened the skies. Human boarding pods slammed into enemy vessels, disgorging death squads that swept through the halls like phantoms. The Council's mighty defenses crumbled in hours. Supreme Chancellor Virel watched in stunned silence as the battle collapsed around him. Screens showed ship after ship erupting in flame, stations torn apart by railgun fire, escape pods vaporized before they could reach safety. He turned to his aides, voice breaking. Was there ever any hope? No one answered. Across the void, Captain Vance led the final charge aboard the dreadnought Savage Dawn. His soldiers moved without hesitation, without pity. He stepped over the bodies of council guards and aides, his rifle spitting death in all directions. In the council chamber, Vance found Chancellor Virel kneeling among the ruins, still clutching the broken seal of his once great alliance. Vance raised his weapon. Virel didn't beg. He just whispered, "Why?" Vance hesitated for a single breath. Then he answered, voice like iron, "Because you made us monsters." The shot echoed through the shattered chamber. When it was over, the last hope of the galaxy lay dead in the ruins of the Sanctum Aeternum. And humanity moved on, leaving only silence in their wake. In the aftermath of the Helios Rift massacre, there was no more resistance. No fleets, no alliances, no treaties whispered in the darkness. What few scattered colonies and strongholds remained hid themselves beneath oceans, inside mountains, or deep underground, hoping to be overlooked, forgotten. But humanity didn't forget. They hunted. Entire star systems were quarantined and burned. Planets that showed signs of alien habitation were scoured from orbit. There were no speeches, no demands for tribute, no banners of conquest raised. Humanity wasn't interested in ruling anyone. They didn't want to govern an empire. They wanted silence. Absolute, permanent silence. Captain Marcus Vance, now promoted to general after the fall of the Council, led Operation Sweep, a campaign to erase the last pockets of organized alien life. On board the assault carrier, Black Mercy, he watched from the observation deck as firestorms consumed the lush jungles of Edras 4. Once a vibrant world, filled with towering blue forests and shimmering lakes, Edras 4 had been home to millions of peaceful Arvani. They had tried to surrender, even offered humans entire continents in exchange for mercy. It didn't matter. Vance didn't feel anger anymore as he watched their world die. He didn't feel anything at all. The fires reflected in his deadened eyes, and all he could think was, they would have done the same to us if they could. The humans had convinced themselves of that long ago. It made the extermination easier. It made the nightmares quieter at night. On the bridge of the Remembrance, General Merik stood before a wall of tactical reports, her mind working faster than any computer. She had built this campaign from the ashes of Earth, forged it into the purest expression of humanity's fury. And now, standing on the edge of total galactic silence, she should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt hollow. An aide approached cautiously, holding a data slate. "General," he said softly, "the Zolari Enclave has sent a plea for negotiations. They're offering full surrender. And reparations." Merik didn't look at him. She didn't even blink. "Send a response," she said. "Yes, ma'am. What should we—" 2 words. The aide swallowed. "Which words?" Merik turned her gaze on him, her eyes colder than the vacuum of space. "No survivors." The aide fled to carry out the order. In the depths of human space, Earth itself had changed beyond recognition. It was no longer the blue marble that poets once sang about. Massive shipyards floated in orbit like mechanical tumors. The surface had been stripped for resources, rebuilt into vast cities of black steel and concrete, bristling with gun emplacements and shield generators. There were no more parks, no more theaters, no more dreams of peace, only preparation for the next war, the next threat, real or imagined. Back on the Black Mercy, Vance walked through the corridors lined with soldiers. Each one wore the same dead stare, the same empty pride. They passed murals not of heroes or victories, but of the fallen. Images of Earth's burning colonies, of craters where cities once stood, of monuments to betrayal. The humans didn't glorify what they had become. They didn't lie to themselves. They knew. And they accepted it. In one quiet corner of the ship, a group of new recruits sat, watching an old video loop from before the war. It showed Earth as it once was. Blue skies, green forests, laughter, music, things they would never see except on screens. A boy, no older than 18, asked his sergeant, "Was it really like that?" The sergeant, a veteran with scars down half his face, stared at the screen for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was rough and low. "It was," he said, "before they took it from us." The boy looked back at the screen, and for a moment there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Grief, maybe. Longing, hope. But it faded quickly, smothered by the same grim determination that filled all of humanity now. Hope was dangerous. Hope could get you killed. Better to be the nightmare. Better to be the storm. Across the galaxy, systems continued to go dark, one after another, like candles snuffed out by a merciless wind. There were no more cries for help. No more desperate messages across the stars. Only silence. And humanity ruled that silence with an iron grip. The galaxy had never been quieter. Where once there had been bustling trade routes, flashing beacons of communication, and vibrant cities on 1,000 worlds, now there was only empty space and abandoned ruins. Humanity had won. They had crushed every enemy, silenced every voice, buried every history but their own. But victory tasted like ash. On board the Remembrance, General Merik sat alone in her private chamber, staring at a hologram flickering weakly above her desk. It was an old image, an Earth sunrise, golden light spilling over a field of wildflowers. A place that didn't exist anymore. Sometimes she wondered if it had ever been real at all, or if it was just a fantasy they'd invented to justify everything they had done. A knock came at her door. She didn't answer, but it opened anyway. Captain Vance entered, his armor scuffed from the latest campaign, his expression grim as always. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Merik didn't look up. "Another pocket of survivors?" "No," Vance said. "Something else." He activated a small device, and the hologram shifted. It showed a planet on the far edge of the Perseus Arm, unnamed, officially abandoned. No settlements, no known alien presence. And yet, sensor logs showed movement, structures, life signs, human life signs. Merik's brows knitted together. "Explain." Vance hesitated. "They're defectors," he said finally. "Refugees from Earth. Dissidents. They abandoned the war effort years ago, went dark. Built their own colony out here, off the grid." Merik's mouth tightened into a hard line. Dissidents. Traitors. People who had run from humanity's final stand because they couldn't stomach the blood it demanded. "How many?" she asked. "Couple thousand, maybe more," Vance said. "They've established farms, schools, a real community. No military presence. They don't even have orbital defenses." Merik stared at the projection, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. They were human. They were the future humanity had lost. "They're breeding weakness," Vance said, as if reading her mind. "If we let them survive, others might follow, might start thinking there's another way besides strength." Merik closed her eyes for a long moment. She could almost hear the voices of her fallen comrades, the ones who had died screaming in the early days of the war, the children whose lives had been snuffed out in alien bombardments, the families torn apart by greed and betrayal. We didn't sacrifice everything just to let it all rot. Her hands clenched into fists. "Prepare the fleet," she said finally, voice like iron. "We wipe them out." Vance saluted sharply, but there was something else in his eyes this time. A flicker of doubt? Regret? It didn't matter. Doubt had no place here. As Vance left, Merik turned back to the hologram of Earth's sunrise. She stared at it for a long time, feeling something deep inside her twist and break. They would never see it again, she realized. The humanity that had loved, dreamed, built beautiful things, that humanity was dead. All that remained was the monster. 2 days later, the Remembrance arrived in orbit over the rogue colony. The settlers had no ships, no weapons capable of piercing the human fleet's shields. Their only defense was a pathetic old communication array, broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies. "We are your brothers and sisters. We only seek peace." Merik listened to it once, then ordered the bombardment. The sky turned red over the rogue colony as kinetic strikes rained down like the wrath of forgotten gods. Forests ignited into walls of flame. Rivers boiled dry. Buildings shattered like glass under the relentless assault. In a control center deep within the colony, a small group of civilians huddled together, clutching each other as the world collapsed around them. There were no soldiers among them, no weapons raised in defiance, only terrified mothers shielding their children, elders praying in a dozen dead languages, young faces pressed against cold stone floors, waiting for the end. And the humans above, once protectors, now executioners, delivered it without hesitation. When the smoke cleared and the last screams faded, there was nothing left but blackened earth and molten ruins. No songs, no memorials, no witnesses. Humanity had turned its own future into a graveyard. And deep inside the Remembrance, in the silence of her private chamber, General Merik sat before the flickering image of a long-dead Earth, and for the first time in years, she wept. Not for the enemy, not for the dead, but for the monstrous thing she and all of humanity had become, and the terrible truth that there was no way back. The galaxy, once vibrant with countless cultures and histories, now drifted as little more than a collection of tombstones under cold stars. Humanity had wiped the board clean. No more alien empires, no more challengers, no more enemies. But victory had left them hollow. Without wars to fight, the fleets began turning inward. Old divisions, long buried under the shared rage of survival, began to crack open again. Different admirals, different factions, each with their own vision for what humanity should become, now that the galaxy lay in ruins at their feet. On board the Remembrance, General Merik convened her final council, a gathering of the surviving military leaders who had guided humanity through its darkest hours. They met in the Grand Atrium, a room once filled with the banners of Earth's nations. Now only black flags hung, stained with soot and ash. Around the massive steel table, grim-faced men and women argued. "We can rebuild," said Admiral Holt, pounding a gauntleted fist against the table. "We have the knowledge, the tech. We can bring back civilization." "Rebuild what?" snapped Commodore Tessa Vryn. "There's no one left to trade with. No culture left to integrate. We are alone. We will rot here unless we keep moving. Keep fighting." "Fighting who?" Holt shot back. "We killed them all." Across the room, another general muttered, "Then maybe we turn the guns on each other." The words hung heavy in the air. General Merik sat silently at the head of the table, listening, watching, measuring the weight of their words. They were soldiers, bred and broken by endless war. None of them remembered how to live without it. Neither did she. Vance stood quietly beside her, arms crossed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes told her everything she already knew. Humanity wasn't made for peace anymore. It was made for conquest, for brutality, for domination. Without an enemy, it would tear itself apart. Merik rose from her seat slowly, and the room fell silent. "Enough," she said, her voice low and final. "There will be no rebuilding." Murmurs swept through the room. "General," she cut them off with a glance. "There's nothing left to rebuild," she continued. "We have outlived our purpose. The galaxy doesn't need rulers. It needs ghosts, memories, warnings carved into the bones of history." Holt looked at her like she had gone mad. "You want us to just disappear?" "I want humanity to remain what we have become," Merik said. "A nightmare, a legend, a force whispered about by those who dare rise from the ashes." Vance finally spoke. "We keep the fleets moving. No homeworld, no empire, only stories, only fear." It was a mad plan, a suicidal plan, but somehow in their broken hearts, the Council knew it was the only one that made sense. They were not builders anymore. They were destroyers, and destroyers had no place in a peaceful galaxy. Slowly, grudgingly, they agreed. The new directive was simple. The fleets would divide into nomadic forces. They would travel the dead lanes of space, visible only when they chose to be. If new civilizations rose from the ruins, if any dared to forget the horrors of war, humanity would return. Not to rule, but to remind. The Remembrance would become the first ghost fleet, slipping into deep space without a trace. As the Council dispersed, preparing to carve humanity into drifting legends, Merik stood alone at the viewport of the ship. Beyond the thick glass, stars stretched out into forever. For a moment, she allowed herself to dream, to imagine what might have been if only the galaxy had welcomed them instead of trying to crush them. If only humanity hadn't been forced to become the very thing it had once feared. A faint buzz broke the silence, a new message on her console. She opened it without thinking. It was from one of the surviving scientists back on Earth, what was left of Earth, anyway. An anomaly detected, far beyond known space. Signals too structured to be natural. Something alive. Merik stared at the report, her heart cold and steady. Perhaps humanity's nightmare wasn't done after all. Perhaps the galaxy still had one last enemy left to find. She turned from the viewport, her cape brushing the cold steel floor, and issued a single command. Plot a course. In the silent, endless dark, humanity's ghosts stirred once more, hungering for one final war. The engines of the Remembrance roared to life, shaking the very bones of the ancient ship as it prepared to plunge into the unknown. Around it, the newly formed ghost fleets readied themselves, massive hulks painted black to blend into the dark between stars. There were no banners, no broadcasts of power or dominance. Humanity was moving like a whisper this time, a cold, relentless breath against the neck of whatever awaited them beyond the rim. In the command deck, General Merik stood with Captain Vance, staring at the star map as it plotted a path into uncharted space. A thick patch of darkness, where even the most advanced sensors had failed to penetrate, stretched ahead of them like a waiting maw. The anomaly had not sent a greeting. It had not sent a threat. It had simply signaled. And that was enough. Merik clenched her hands behind her back, feeling the familiar stirrings of purpose, the only purpose they had left. Vance leaned toward her, voice low. What if it's nothing? Just cosmic noise? Merrick's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. Then we leave our mark anyway. He didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. As the fleets moved out, leaving behind the scorched remains of known space, a quiet tension settled over the human forces. These were not the vibrant, reckless soldiers who had first sailed into Galactic War years ago. These were hardened relics, living weapons, men and women who had burned away everything soft inside themselves. They carried no flags. They sang no songs. They carried only fire. Weeks turned into months as the fleets crossed the vast, dead stretches beyond the galactic rim. Strange, half-seen things moved out there, masses too large, energies too old to name. Humanity pushed on without hesitation because fear no longer held any power over them. And then, without warning, they found it. A world, not just any world, an ancient one, covered in titanic structures, black and gleaming like frozen oil. It was not natural. It had not been born. It had been built by something far older than any of the fallen empires humanity had destroyed. At the center of the world, a tower pierced the heavens, stretching up into low orbit. It pulsed faintly with an energy that felt almost alive. The anomaly's source. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Merik studied the scans with growing certainty. "Prepare a landing team," she said. "I want boots on the ground within the hour." Vance nodded. "You're going yourself?" Merik turned to him, a small flicker of something, pride or perhaps defiance, in her cold gaze. "If this is the last enemy we ever face, I intend to look it in the eye." The landing was rough. The atmosphere fought them, dense and heavy with strange particles that made the sky shimmer with unnatural colors. But humans had survived worse. They pushed through, landing heavy drop ships on cracked, blackened plains. Merik led the advance, 100 soldiers fanning out behind her through the towering alien structures. Everything about the place felt wrong. The angles were too sharp. The dimensions seemed to twist if you stared too long. They reached the base of the tower, where a single door, massive and covered in runes older than any language, stood waiting. It opened as they approached, without a sound. Inside, the walls pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Lights flickered, and something watched. Deep in the tower's heart, they found it. Not a weapon, not an army, a mirror, massive, stretching from floor to ceiling, framed in black stone. When Merik stepped toward it, the surface rippled, and from within she saw herself, not as she was, but as humanity had become. Twisted, broken, a reflection of endless war, endless vengeance. Behind her reflection, shapes moved, shadows, clawing, grasping. They weren't alien, they weren't foreign. They were human. The mirror showed the truth. Humanity had not been at war with the galaxy. It had been at war with itself all along. The true enemy had always been their own hatred, their own need for retribution, their own fear. Merik stared into the mirror, into the nightmare she and her people had willingly become. For the first time in a long, long while, she felt a flicker of doubt, a whisper against the raging storm inside her. But it was far too late for regrets now. Behind her, the soldiers waited for orders, weapons ready, faces blank. Merik turned away from the mirror, her decision final. "Mark the planet," she said. "Then burn it." No one hesitated. No one questioned. As they prepared the charges that would turn the ancient world into ash, the mirror pulsed once more, sending one last signal into the void, a warning to whatever distant life might still be out there. Humanity is coming. Humanity has no mercy left. Humanity is the nightmare that will never end. As the Remembrance and its sister fleets vanished back into the endless dark, only ruins remained. The galaxy had survived its first great predator. But something worse now prowled the stars forever, and it wore the face of humanity.